Welcome to With All Due Respect. This is a podcast for women over 40 who are looking for sane, frank advice about their health and wellness, especially through and after menopause. I'm Amanda Thebe, a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and the author of the best-selling book, Menopocalypse: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. I'd love you to join me every week as I chew the fat with some fab guests on hot topics that directly impact you. I also know the power of conversation is lost, and there's nothing better than sitting down for a natter with your mate and putting the world to rights. And that's exactly what I'll be doing with this podcast. We'll really get to know my guests, warts and all. I've made it my mission to help you by exploding a few myths and presenting you with plain, simple facts. These inspiring conversations will hopefully empower you to be a healthy, strong, resilient bitch, just like me. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review, and then visit me at amandathebe.com. And now let's get started on today's show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to With All Due Respect. This week, I am really excited to be joined by Meredith Root, who is one of the co-founders of Tactical Nutrition. Welcome, Meredith. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to tell everyone a little bit about you, and then we'll just get stuck in straight away. So Meredith has her Bachelor of Science in Bioprocess Engineering, which has a focus on industrial microbiology, biotechnology, and genetics. You're super smart then, hey? I see.
Yeah.
Working in R&D for large biopharmaceutical companies where you help develop therapies and drug products for diseases like MS, ALS, Alzheimer's, dementia. That's amazing. And a bunch of other neurological autoimmune conditions. After doing that for 6.5 years, you decided to dabble in CrossFit. We'll talk about that and the CrossFit Games because it always appeals to me, but I've never sort of quite gone there. And then you were going to go back to your R&D job after trying that professionally, but then you met the love of your life, Alex, and you got married and you moved to Calgary, Alberta. We can talk about the weather if you want as well. And then together, the two of you created the company Tactic Foundational Nutrition, and I came across you because I got sent your post like 1 trillion times. That's what like our followers do. They go, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen this?" And I think people knew that I would be drawn to you because of your approach and your humor and just the message that you're sending out there, like trying to fight back all of the misinformation and the nonsense. And then you did this great post calling out menopause bullshit. So then I was like, yes, I love them. I'm going to get her on the show to talk about this. So where to start is a good question. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on here. So let's talk about the fact that you pivoted from a pretty serious profession. I'm not saying nutrition isn't serious, but I mean, this is like, I married an engineer. I was just saying to you, I understand the time and commitment and the rigor that goes with being an engineer. And you then made that your career focus. There's like 10, 12 years of your life. And then you decided to sort of shift. So yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the shift was kind of born out of necessity because I lived in North Carolina, which is where I was raised. And there's a large engineering and pharmaceutical presence in that state. And so it was something I obviously had a lot of interest in. That's why I pursued it. And then when I moved to Alberta after I met Alex, I sort of assumed that I was a very hireable person and I could just go back into that industry up here. And then I learned that, and I figured out the hard way that there just isn't an R&D or, drug development presence in Alberta. It's all oil and gas. So really my only option for working in engineering up here was to work as an oil and gas, like a chemical engineer, which I don't have any interest in that. So the shift was kind of born out of necessity. It was nutrition coaching was something, and just nutrition in general, like the science of it was something that I had an interest in for a long time. And I was helping some people on the side. I was working part-time for another company who is another nutrition company at that time. And so the pivot that occurred in 2018 was it was one part, okay, this is something that I'm actually very interested in, and it feels productive to be on the front end of the healthcare industry instead of the back end. Not that, when you're working with life-saving therapeutics like I was, it's not like it's reactive medicine. It isn't. It's very much preventative for a niche population of people, and that's super necessary. I'm not going to get on here and poo-poo the pharmaceutical industry. I would never do that. But it feels good to help people be proactive with their health. And so that was a natural shift, but a shift that was born out of this is kind of my only option. And also Alex and I wanted to sort of take control of the trajectory of our business and of the people who we worked with and control the messaging more than just working for another company. So that was kind of the shift for me. It was one part passion and one part necessity.
Love. Well, I mean, we do things for love, and same with me, right? I mean, I moved around with my husband's career as well, but not to the detriment of my own. And you just end up finding your way, right? So just digging into that a little bit, that was really interesting when you said, you wanted to create a company where you controlled the narrative, you controlled who worked for you. And I feel that so much, especially in a very patriarchal industry that we're in, the wellness industry. And I say this all the time, so it's not like I haven't said this before, but I get really frustrated that the crusty white men that lead the fitness industry and the nutrition industry don't seem to want to talk about the nuance or the differences that might happen with females. And I actually sort of went along with that message for at least 15 years myself until I realized when I was getting hit with perimenopause that there's a rabbit off here, something's not quite right. I'm doing all this usual stuff, but it's not sitting right. There's got to be more to the message. And so what was like the ethos of your company? Like, did you want it to be female-led, female-focused, or was it more about inclusivity? What were your sort of like visions for the company?
I mean, our vision and our core values have always been inclusive, and, we value diversity. So we don't specifically, we don't only work with women. We don't only work with menopausal women. We don't only work with athletes. Like, we believe that good nutrition and the foundations work for everyone. So we work with everyone. We work with men, we work with women, we work with Olympic athletes, we work with people who haven't worked out in 10 years. We work with everyone. And that's always been really important for us. And then from a business, like on the business side of things, it's hard being a female run business. It's hard being a woman in the space. So we've always had a passion for providing opportunities to people who are like us. So we have a team, and it's not like we only hire women. Our team is comprised of mostly women, and that's, partially because it's like there are a lot more female nutrition coaches out there. But frankly, like we haven't come across a male that really is what we want. If we interviewed the right person who happened to be male, we would hire them. But we haven't found that person. So on the surface, it might look like we're being exclusive to women, but we're not. It's just kind of the way that the cookie has crumbled for us.
Yeah. So you say that your clientele is quite diverse, and it's interesting because, like attracts like, and I obviously have attracted a lot of people like me. And that's why I think you have a lot of female coaches wanting to work with you, because you admire people that are similar to you and you want to sort of be in that space and feed off that energy. But same goes with clients. And throughout my time, I've done the same thing. I've worked with people that look like me, sound like me, like their time at the time they were mothers, and then maybe they were menopausal, and maybe they were stay-at-home moms. But then I've also worked with athletes. I've also worked with like professional athletes and the aging population, you name it. You sort of tick all of those boxes. But what I did find is that the minute I started talking about my own sort of like journey and things that I've experienced, I became a lot more relatable to my audience. And I'm wondering if you found the sort of same thing, like, and I don't really know like what your specific audience is. I feel like they're like 30 to 40-year-old women that are like saying they're strong, they're capable, they're speaking their mind, and they're really being supportive, but they're also athletes. Is that what you found has happened as well, just with your own audience? They're like, yes, I'm like them. I want to be like Meredith.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a balance between people who, wanting to be someone who people want to be. And like, that sounds not the best, but that's people do look up to individuals on the internet. But also a lot of times being an athlete, being in a relatively fit body, that can work as an anti-credential too, because, people are very quick to say, well, how can you talk about this? You don't have that experience, or you don't know what it's like to be in a large body. They're really quick to discredit your ability to empathize and understand the struggle. So, even though we don't necessarily share the exact same struggle that a lot of our clients have and they go through every day, we have a podcast, we do an email list, obviously Instagram. Like we do talk about our personal struggles with, with mental health, with being able to accept difficult situations in life. Alex and I both have been through a lot personally in a relatively young age. And so the more that we share about that, the more people connect with us. And I think that's the craving online, is just for some realness. It's not, especially in the fitness and health space, it can feel quite detached, quite performative. It feels really fake a lot of the time. So if you just inject, if 10% of your content is something that people can relate to, they feel like they know you, they feel like they understand that you struggle in your own ways, that's huge. I mean, that's the way that humans connect, is vulnerability. Yeah. And so being vulnerable and showing up in the health space and being like, yeah, you know what? I'm not perfect. I have bad days. I struggle with my mental health. That's even if, I haven't, gone through menopause, or I haven't ever really struggled being in a large body, just saying like, I have my own shit, that goes a long way for people online.
And it's actually May, although this is getting recorded in May, won't go out until later on in June. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And I've been speaking about my own personal struggles, and I never struggled with, I feel like I had a challenge in life. Lots of horrible things happened. And I was like, I was on top of my mental well-being. Probably I was a bit British about it, and I actually probably just put it in a box and stored it away. Yeah, that didn't happen. We're all repressed in everything we do, and the same is for our mental health. But I actually think that came back to bite me in the ass in perimenopause. And so for the first time in my whole life, struggling with depression, with suicidal ideology too, pretty damn horrible. And I initially felt like a failure, initially felt ashamed, initially lied about it, didn't talk about having antidepressants, blah, blah, blah. And it was my son that called me out on my bullshit. He basically said, how can you sort of be the person you are and then lie about stuff like this? And it was such a relief to actually normalize what I was feeling. And actually the feedback I got was, oh, thank God, like it's not just me, like there's other people out there. And so can you talk a little bit about the type of struggles that you disclose to your audience as far as your mental well-being is concerned? Do you feel comfortable doing that now?
Yeah. I mean, I can go way back, right? Like, I think that I have both big T and little t trauma in my life. And, for a long time, I was in a heterosexual relationship. I was actually married to a man for a long time, very, very deep in the closet as a gay person. So that was one of the more difficult things that I've gone through, was having to get out of that relationship and basically having my coming out story attached to a very public breakup and divorce. So, and as hard as that was, there wasn't a single person in my life who was disappointed with me for doing it. I think that gay people and queer people harbor a lot of shame and this belief that when you come out and you tell people that your parents are going to be disappointed or your friends are going to be disappointed, but really, people just want you to, I think, be happy. And so what that did for me, that was the scariest thing that I've ever done in my whole life. So I did that and I was okay. And so it was like, well, I can start being open about other things in my life. And one of the things that I struggled with a long time, and I didn't talk about this with anyone until literally I was like 27 or 28 years old, like relatively late in life, was, my mom was an alcoholic for most of my childhood and I didn't have a stable upbringing. It was something that I harbored a lot of shame for, because I wanted to blame myself. I mean, I was a kid. I was 11, 12 years old, and I didn't know how to handle that. And so I was thrust into kind of the parenting role for my own mom, all while trying to hide it and pretend, with my friends and social circles as a teenager that my life was normal and there was nothing to see here. And so that was really, really challenging. And it was something, that I just didn't talk about for a long time. And my mom, she passed away in 2015 as a result of her addiction. And even then I would tell people, I would lie. And I said, I would say she had a liver cancer or some other disease. I would not name it. I didn't want people to know. And so the experience of coming out as gay and having that be okay, I felt like I could come out of this other closet that I was hiding in, which was this shame that I had associated with my upbringing. And I started telling more people about that. And it's amazing how many people share that story and have childhoods that are similar to that. And just hearing, like, from my own healing, sharing my story and then hearing people echo back their experience as, you know, a child and teenager in a similar situation was like, wow, that's helping me heal. So like sharing becomes this like positive feedback loop. The more you do it, the more you get back, the more you get back, the more you heal. And so it just becomes this like really beautiful kind of like growing experience before, I think, you know, it just feels very dark. But one of our favorite sayings, and Alex does this one a lot, is shame can't bear the light. So whatever it is that you feel a deep amount of shame for, if you just tell people, if you just put it out there, it can't survive it. Like shame grows in the dark. And, you know, once it's out, it's over, because that vulnerability is what connects you to other humans. Connection to other humans is what heals you.
It's amazing. I love that. I haven't heard you say that or Alex say that. That's amazing. Yeah. And, you know, if only your 11-year-old self knew that, you weren't on your own. And that's the thing, right? There's a lot of my own son has gone through some personal mental health struggles. And one of the main issues around it was he was the only person going through his particular situation. And usually it's never the case. And that was one of the first things I found talking about menopause. I was like, oh God, do I want to talk about this? And it was one of those doors I opened and I haven't been able to shut, because people are like, I have to know, like we need to know what the hell's going on. I'd love to know about the shift from engineering. You couldn't do the R&D in Calgary. And so you decided to do CrossFit professionally, just like that.
Yeah, well, I started doing CrossFit when I was in North Carolina. And so it was one of those things, you know, I've been an athlete my whole life in one way or another. And I had an aptitude for this particular training methodology, which also happens to be a sport. And so, you know, I had made some goals and I had set some milestones around 2015. And, you know, basically like if I can get to this level as essentially a part-time athlete, still working my engineering job, I will take off 1 year to a year and a half to kind of dabble and see where I can go with it. There's not a lot of money in CrossFit. You can't make a living doing it, or at least you couldn't at that time. I think there's a bit more now. So yeah, I did that. I basically left my job, but it was there kind of waiting for me to come back. Like it was a conversation that I had had. And yeah, pursued training full time and learned during that year to year and a half that full-time training and full-time athlete life is just not something that I'm interested in at all. It's a really small world. And when your interactions with people are limited to talking about exercise and workouts and just fitness stuff, like I felt like a little bit like I was being put in a box mentally. I just could not get the right amount of mental stimulation. I felt like I wasn't learning, like I wasn't growing in a way that's really important to me. So I knew right away that was going to be a short-lived endeavor, but it was successful. I did quite well. And I went to the CrossFit Games, which is, essentially kind of the like Olympics or like world championships of the sport. It's very hard to qualify for that as an individual athlete. So yeah, it was nice to be able to check that box and then put that experience away on a shelf. And I think that, you know, early on in owning this business, that was kind of what people were the most interested in, right? Because it's this credential that you have. It's this thing that's really hard to do. And I always say like, that is the least interesting part of
thing about you. Yeah.
It's like, it's just a very small thing for me. But
it's very cool. It's very cool. And anyone who's like not really understanding what that looks like, because there's a lot of women that are just like dabbling in fitness, that for both our audiences, you have to do shit like walking on your hands and stuff, don't you? And like, you know, every day my son and I, we practice our handstands, and I sort of can do them now, but the idea of being able to walk on my hands, and I think I'm quite brave, and I think that I'm game for things. And I'm just like, how do people just do it? They just flip upside down and they just fucking go for a walk like it's like on their feet.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes faster. Like the people who are really good at, handstand walking, they're walking faster than I can walk on my feet. It's crazy. Yeah.
There's an element of bravery about it for sure. And do you still do CrossFit? Is that still one of your go-to workouts?
It is. Yeah. I work with a coach. It's more of a strength and conditioning program, like true CrossFit with the, very random workouts. I don't do that so much. My training is very well designed and progressive, and it's perfect for what I need. I always, when people ask, like, well, what should I do for fitness? If you can afford to hire a coach, hire a coach. It's the best. Like, even for me, someone who knows a lot about training and I could program for myself. It's not something that I want to do. It's nice to have someone who can look at my schedule, look at my access to gyms and equipment and just write up workouts. They don't have to worry about it. And even, as a retired athlete in my mid 30s, I'm still improving in a lot of ways with my fitness. And that's really, really enjoyable and really fun.
Yeah. There's a menopause health and fitness specialist course that I helped contribute to, and it's written by Dr. Carlo Di Girolamo. I can never say her name, Di Girolamo. I don't know if you know, she's a consultant endocrinologist, but she's also a CrossFit athlete as well.
Oh, amazing.
And I don't do CrossFit. One of the reasons I don't is because I actually don't like I don't like the variability of it. I really like structure, and I don't like the fact that I might be overworking my shoulders one week. I just find that a little bit frustrating for me, but I like the structure. I like the way the WODs are pulled together. Sometimes I want to just work out really hard and fast for 15 minutes and they have the great structure behind them. And she really pushes them as an excellent way for menopausal women to approach strength training. And I tend to agree with her. Again, more on the structure rather than the specific exercises sometimes, because we're usually time poor. We're usually looking for something, that's quick and effective, but also the idea that we create enough stimulus. We're working hard enough in the time we have. And so I don't know if you see that in your sort of work as well, that, there's a lot of women in their 40s and 50s that seem to like to do that type of training.
Yeah. And it's the timing of menopause is really interesting because it is a time in women's lives where, not only are you battling some hormonal changes that are challenging, they make a lot of people feel really shitty. But for people with kids, think about that. People always say well, I'm so tired. I don't know what's changed. But think about when, most people have kids in their late 20s, early 30s. Well, how old are those kids when you're in your mid 40s, right? They're high school age. Maybe they're doing sports. They have a lot of other obligations. So you as a parent and as a mom are probably a lot busier on top of your normal schedule with your career, your job, if you have one, just managing what your kids are up to. So there's just your plate is more full. There's not as much time. There's not as much energy. And so I agree that, CrossFit represents a really nice kind of soft entry into a strength training. And you get a lot of instruction, which I appreciate in the main lift, squat, press, deadlift that, a lot of women have never received. They've been kind of told, here, have some 5-pound dumbbells, do 20 to 30 reps per set. Here's some bands, do Zumba, do Pilates, definitely never touch a barbell. And so it's a group setting. They get to walk in and see people who are kind of like them, which is really important. And I know a lot of women who, start in a CrossFit gym, a class setting, and they catch the bug for strength training. And then they end up either advancing as an athlete or maybe taking a more specialized progressive approach with their training. So I love CrossFit for that. I think it is a really wonderful entry to training. It's the randomness and variability, like you said, that I don't always love. But there's some gyms who do a much better job with progressive style training than others.
Oh, I think since Glassman left, CrossFit's completely overhauled itself. Yes. I don't think CrossFit now is the CrossFit of 15 years ago. When I went to my very first CrossFit class, I walked out and I was like, he wants me to do muscle ups. The guy didn't look at me at all. He just thought, let me just show her as many crazy things as she can do. And now they're doing these specialized lifting courses and Olympic lifting. And it's I love it now. I feel like it's a much more sensible approach. And then talking about menopause, right? So let's get into the meat and bones. Let's have a little bitch. Why did you feel it was necessary to do a post on menopause? And then why did you feel it was necessary to specifically call out the Galveston diet when you did it?
Right. We do some Ask Me Anythings like AMAs on our page a lot. And, I think because of our messaging, our audience has shifted more towards, the early 40s to 50s. That's a large demographic of people who follow us. So we always get asked a lot of questions. And menopause is number one. It's a tricky thing for me to talk about, even though, we do a lot of reading, we do a lot of learning. We work with a lot of people who are in menopause or premenopause or postmenopause. Like we have a lot of experience with that group of people, but it's challenging to talk about because anytime we talk about it, we usually get you're in your mid 30s, you have no idea what you're talking about. You haven't been through it. Just wait, you'll see. So people discredit us because of our age and who we are. And I always like to say that would be like only hiring a dentist who has bad teeth or a lawyer for your divorce who has also been through a divorce. Like it's just, experience is important. Empathy is really important, but it's a really questionable credential because I think when people are looking for individuals who share the experience and that's their main credential, then you end up in situations where you are buying a book like The Galveston Diet or these really specialized approaches being sold by, people who are saying, well, I've been through this. You can trust me. I know what I'm talking about, that kind of thing. So I've been kicking around, how do we have productive conversations about menopause? Because what tends to happen when you say something, for example, we've posted about how based on the research of Dr. Herman Pontzer, who's a researcher out of Duke University, who's done all this metabolic research and basically has identified these 4 metabolic stages. And we can say conclusively, like there's nothing that changes with your metabolism when you are in your, 30s, 40s, 50s. That change doesn't actually occur until you're well over 60 to 65. When you say that to people,
and then it's only like 0.7%. I think that report says it's small.
Like 14 calories a year. That's how much your metabolism drops. So when you say things like that, and you say to women, there's nothing about your metabolism that changes when you go through menopause, they hear you discrediting the experience of menopause, which is not something that we would ever do. And our messaging has always been, while you might want something, like I think people crave an answer or something that feels like it's outside of my control. There's nothing I can do. And we're basically here to say that's not the case. There are some things that are out of your control. The way that you experience, the decline in your hormones, that's your experience. But the reality is there are a lot of things that are still within your control. And so people don't always like to hear that messaging. And even though we can cite all the research in the world, they'll fight with us over that. And so it's not like always a very friendly space to walk into. So, that day I felt compelled. I don't know if I had seen something online. I'm sure that was kind of the catalyst of it. And honestly, I was just talking about sort of, strength training and then juxtaposing that with this whole industry that's been born to target the vulnerable populations of people, one of which is women who are going through menopause, just looking for an answer. That's all. They want someone to sell them something because they feel so helpless and out of control. But there's this big, these big toggles that they've never actually used, which is strength training and nutrition. But they'll buy into programs and supplements and all of this stuff. And, the Galveston diet is one that I've seen. People started tagging us in that back in, I don't know, like around January 1st, like beginning of the year, I started seeing this around. I'm like, why does it sound like a Civil War battle also? Like Galveston. Anyways, so people had started tagging us in that, and I had done some research on it. And basically I was like, oh, this is kind of like a ketogenic, low carb, weird, really weird, fasting window. Yeah. And then, I was on her website, and I don't know her. I can't speak to her personally. I've never met her. Yeah. I have a hunch, but she's got the book, she's got the coaching program. She's got all of this research cited. I think she has 54 research articles supporting her book. Only 2 of those have anything at all to do with menopause. And neither of those studies, which I read, come to the same conclusions that she draws. And so it's like, okay, you're citing all this research that is frankly quite weak, as standalone science tends to be. And you're taking general research, and instead of writing a book that could help the general population, which is the research that you're using, you're writing it for a very specific and a very vulnerable population because of your experience as a woman and the field that she worked in. So it all just feels very targeted and very intentional. And, you're writing, like people who write those books, and again, I don't know, I'm not her, but I'm assuming like, that women going through menopause are just like primed and ready to buy a book written by a female doctor who has already been through menopause herself. So it's, that's why I called that one out, because it was front of mind. It literally it sort of just rolled out of my mouth. I was not expecting it to cause the shitstorm that it caused in her community, but no surprise, people would rather just defend her than do any amount of critical thinking themselves. And that's the society that we live in.
It is. Yeah. And there's like cult rippling underneath there as well, because people have bought into completely everything she said and don't know how to question it. It's people like you that do. And I was going to just point you into the direction of my colleague, Abby Langer, who I'm sure you know. Mm-hmm. She lives around the corner from me, by the way.
Oh, cool,
and she bought the book and reviewed it too. And then she said, I'm going to gift it to you as a present, but I made her return it. I am not interested in reading it. And Abby came to the same conclusions, and she looked through every single study. And I've done the same when it comes to the collagen things that she sells. She cites studies that are done by collagen companies or done on rodents. And there's really just not enough information to make the wild claims that people like her make. But, obviously, I wrote a book on menopause too. And, when I wrote this book, I wrote it from the standpoint as a person that's gone through menopause with a knowledge gap. And so my book was about providing the missing knowledge. Why aren't we telling? Why have we gone through life and all of a sudden this is happening and we don't know anything about it? I mean, this started for me 10 years ago, when I was 42. And then I just was like, I just need to share this information. And my personal experience of menopause was shit. Taking hormone therapy for me was shit. I had like the worst experience. It was almost like everything I tried it failed and made me feel worse. And I'm like, oh, give me a break. And so I write about these experiences, but I still tried not to put my bias into it. And by that, I meant I thought hormone therapy was the answer for me, and it wasn't. But I know it is for a lot of women, but not all. And I'm getting really tired of these extreme conversations where most of the women sit in the middle and they just want to know, what should I know? What should I ask my doctor? What can I do personally? What can I do? And most of these people aren't doing the 93% of stuff that will actually make them feel better. Moving a little bit more, introducing some strength training, trying to look at their diet in a bit more of a balanced way, cutting out the alcohol, going to bed at a good time, calming the fuck down.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. But again, all the tenets of health that we talk about, even like the mindset, how we like approach this time of our lives, how we actually have a really nice conversation that's compassionate with ourselves instead of always being a dick about it, right? And I've had to do the hard work too. And so I think there's a way to add, I'm not defending myself here, but I do believe that there's a way to write a book about menopause that adds value and solutions that aren't extreme, that pull from your experience, but stay within the medical consensus and the nutrition and exercise science as we know it. There are some nuances, but most of the stuff that we know is exactly the same and it works. Maybe we need some small focuses in different directions. But all of this to say is that I think that anyone should talk about menopause if they feel like they're knowledgeable enough. I once did a post, and this is a long way to square this circle. The same person from the Galveston Diet, Mary Claire Hever, once called out this young guy, 20-year-old, 22-year-old, who was like, hey, menopausal women, I see you. You're my clients. I've done my best to be knowledgeable about this. I can help you. And he put his hand up and she called him out and said, nobody should be talking about menopause if they haven't been through it. And it was like really aggressive. And I thought, oh, let me go and check him out. This Irish guy in Ireland, obviously. And I went to his post and I was like, but it's good. It's a good post and it's respectful and it's basically saying, I'll never know what it's like to be you, but I'm willing to learn all the things we wanted. And so I did a post saying, should young men talk about menopause? And the answer is yes, if they do it in a respectful way that sees the person in front of them, that wants to learn and wants to be a support system for them. There's absolutely no reason why. And that's the type of place that I think we all should be in this conversation. We shouldn't try and have somebody who's claiming to have cracked the code on, the missing link or whatever. It's just disingenuous, I feel like, It's taken advantage of women, drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And so personally, that post for me, I loved your post because I just was like, thank God, we're changing the way we talk about this in a way that women feel seen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, thank you for that. And, and I know, and I was telling you off air that I spoke to Jen Gunter and I went, Jen, did you see this? And she was like, I did. And I've started following them and I love them. And I want to like Meredith.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because there's this whole like diet book industry out there, specifically diet books written by doctors that are a real problem. And I the follow-up post that I did to that, which is so funny, I did an apology post where basically I was like, sorry, I missed an opportunity to elaborate more on why this type of thing's so annoying. But people they thought I was actually apologizing. I was like, I'm not apologizing. I'm apologizing for not elaborating more when I could have. But it takes advantage of, it's this white coat thing, and it takes advantage of people's willingness to listen to authority figures even when they're not right. And the thing that's really complicated about Dr. Haber is she's not wrong about everything. And that's what gets really confusing. And people said, well, she's advocating for, women's healthcare and, talking about how the medical system has overlooked women and this and this. And I'm like, that's all true. That is all. And it's good to talk about it, but it doesn't make everything that she says true. And that's what really complicates the dialogue.
I think that she's probably a very good OBGYN. I don't know. I don't actually follow her work, but when somebody, and I'm not particularly saying her, like doctors with diet books, use this appeal to authority where we can't question them at all, then that to me is a simple red flag. It's a red flag that even I had Dr. Spencer Nadolsky and Carl on the podcast, and they're both really accomplished doctors, and they were saying, these are red flags.
Yeah.
You should be able to question everything, but let's keep it respectful. Let's just talk about it and say, why do you feel like it's okay to sort of say that? Anyway, just moving on from that, I love your humor. I don't really know that everybody gets it. I think your humor is very British. If you don't soak everything in sarcasm, then it's not funny. And so I see the twinkle in your eye. Probably more so than Alex. You've got a little twinkle and you say things and I can almost hear the snigger behind. It's true though, right?
Yeah, I really like dry, highbrow humor. Yeah, if I have to spell the joke out, it's not funny anymore. So, but yeah, not everyone gets it.
I think that they're chiming in on it a little bit now though. I find it hilarious though. So I almost am watching now, waiting for the not the punchline, because there isn't a punchline, but just to see where you do the little twist, stick the knife in and twist it. Okay, we have come to the end of our time. I could chat with you all the time. By the way, I'm in Calgary in October, so I might come and have a cup of tea with you.
Yeah, please do. We'll be here.
Yeah, let's do that. Any words of advice for anyone listening? I always sort of try and leave on something that's a takeaway, really, because I feel as though because of the fact that there are these such extreme diet views out there now, it's muddied the water and it's really confusing. And we hear that our audiences are well, I don't know who to listen to anymore. And I love the fact that yours is very sane and very sensible nutrition. So could you give some advice to anyone listening about how to even tackle nutrition to start with?
Yeah, it's a lot of people focus on what they think they should be doing. And they do all this research and reading and listening and watching to figure out, well, what's the best diet for me? What do I need to be doing? And the reality is, the neat thing about nutrition and diet is everyone has a diet. We eat 2 to 3 times a day, sometimes more. And I think people neglect the value in understanding what it is that they're doing right now. A lot of people ask us, well, what should my macros be? How do I track? How do I do this? How do I know what numbers I should be hitting? I'm like, well, do you know what you're doing now? And the answer is no. So it's figure out what you're doing now. So then at least you have and this is the engineer, the scientist in me, at least then you have a scientific baseline that you can work off of. So spend, 2 weeks just tracking what you already eat. Figure out what those numbers look like from a calorie standpoint, a macronutrient standpoint, what time of day are you eating? And that does 2 things. Number one, it will tell you if you have the mental capacity and the energy to make changes. Because if you can't track your food, the stuff that you're already eating for 2 weeks, what are you going to do when you make crazy changes and you don't get to eat all the foods that you like, right? But start with what you're doing as a baseline so that you have something to compare to. Like that's the biggest miss for people, is that they lack any amount of scientific control. And so then you can't really assess what's working and what's not working, or even understand if what's working is working because of, the reasons that you think, right? Like Galveston diet, is that working because of the specifics of the diet, or is it working because you've never actually adhered to a calorie deficit for any amount of time to try to lose body fat? Like there's no baseline. So my advice is always to take the time, establish a baseline with your nutrition and your intake and your other habits, and then make small changes. Like don't overhaul everything all at once. Just pick off the low hanging fruit, figure out what's going to be the best bang for your buck. And if you're not sure what those things are, don't be afraid to hire someone for a period of time to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that awareness piece is key. And even for those people that are emotionally attached to the food, it's not as simple sometimes as data collection. I feel like I can do that because I don't, I have a pretty good relationship with food, but for others, sometimes it's not there. But even just looking at what caused you to eat, even, it's the whole thing, isn't it? Like body, mind, soul approach. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, thank you, Meredith, for coming on the show. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Good luck with everything you're doing. Where should we find you? What's the best place to find the company?
Yeah, we're most active on our Instagram channel, which is at Tactic Nutrition. You can find me personally at Meredith_root. Alex, my partner, is at AAParker1. And then our website is tacticmethod.com.
That's great. I'll make sure they're in the show notes, and go and check them out and follow along, because I'm telling you, it's awesome and it's so much fun to follow along with what you're doing. Thank you for being an ally. I really appreciate everything you're both doing.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was really great.
Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like what you hear, then why not subscribe to this podcast and leave me a review? You see, when you do this, it helps to raise the profile of my show and attract new listeners. And it also allows me to continue to deliver valuable content with great guests. And in return for you doing that, I will send you my 12-week core-focused program called Abs on Fire as a thank you. Simply drop me an email at amanda@amandasteve.com and I'll wing that your way. Bye.